Hey everybody, this is a major milestone for us today. Welcome to episode 100, Cue the Champagne, of Unbeatable. Over the last year and a half, almost 2 years, there's been some amazing guests, but today I get a chance to relive a very powerful moment in my life. And a guy that was right next to me when I returned to Mogadishu. I'm super excited to bring you as my guest for episode 100, Jake Hamilton, on this very special episode of Unbeatable.
These stories of triumph over adversity will help you handle your toughest days in life and become unbeatable.
Before we get into the story with Jake, and you're going to love this guy's story, I want to remind you that this podcast wouldn't be possible unless it was for people like the Solomon Foundation. These folks are helping thousands, 7,000 plus investors, and they're helping people take a little bit of money and grow the church. They help you make an excellent return on your money and make an eternal impact at the same time. I want to say thank you to the Solomon Foundation for sponsoring this episode. And if you want to know more about these folks, go to thesolomonfoundation.org. Now, here's my interview with the guy that has a backstage pass to life, Jake Hamilton. Hey, Jake, this is a great privilege to be able to talk to you on this episode of Unbeatable. Thanks for being with me, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today.
Hey, we're going to catch up because it's been a long time since we talked, but did you know that you are the 100th episode? If I had sound effects in the background, I'd have a huge studio audience clapping. But man, you're the 100th episode. This is a big milestone for Unbeatable. And I want to thank you for being the centerpiece guest for episode number 100.
Well, honored to be here and congratulations on hitting that milestone. That's incredible.
Thanks, man. We're going to catch up because we haven't talked to each other, I think, if my timing is right, in 10 years.
Yep.
And I want to go back and describe how we met each other, but we'll say that for later on in this episode, man. Just so that people get a chance to know a little bit about you. Tell everybody where you're living now and tell them what you do for a living.
Yeah, so I live in Austin, Texas. Been here for about 15 years now. Live here with my wife and 2 children, a boy and a son and a daughter who we just recently received. And I am a director and a cinematographer. So I work in the film industry, and background is a lot of camera work. Recently, I've been directing a lot more. Just felt like it was a great way to continue to challenge myself in what I do.
Yeah. For everybody who's listening right now, you definitely want to get Jake's autograph. If you live in Austin and you bump into him in the grocery store, stop him and ask him for his autograph. He's going to, that autograph's going to be worth some money one of these days. Hey, did you grow up out west in Wyoming? Is that where you grew up?
No, so I grew up in Texas. I grew up in Houston. And I love getting to the mountains. So I try to get to the Rockies as often as I can. But I know that, I'm pretty sure where you're going with this one in Wyoming and everything. And so I have spent a significant amount of time up there, and excited to visit with you about it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into a documentary that you've done that I absolutely love. I hope everybody checks that out. After we wrap up this episode, you've got a couple of documentaries out there that are, one of them's doing really, really well right now. In fact, I saw a guy watching it on an airplane, one row in front of me, and I was like, I'm going to watch that. It looks so, I can't even hear what they're saying, but it looks so good. I'm going to watch Facing Nolan.
Yeah.
The first chance that I get. So we'll talk about that one in just a few minutes too. So can we talk a little bit about growing up in Houston, what life was like for you, and how did you end up in the entertainment industry?
Yeah.
Because you couldn't pay me enough money to do what you're doing for a living.
It's something you never really know until you get into it. And so when I meet with other young filmmakers who are trying to break into the industry, they're like, how do I do this? Like, what steps do I need to take? And one, nobody's path to this is ever the same, but I'm like, you got to be really committed, almost married to it. Like it's rough kind of being a contractor or freelancer. There's a lot of fun things that we get to do. I always describe it as having like a backstage pass to life. Like you get to go places, meet people, do things that you would never get access to, but because you have a camera in your hand, all of a sudden you're there. But it's a lot of time on the road, and sometimes that can be a lonely place to be. Thankfully, I work with a lot of great people that almost feel like family to me. So that's been great. But growing up in Houston, when I did, um, it was a great time. Like it was a really fun childhood. I grew up playing sports, and when I finally retired from high school sports, I somehow stumbled.
He put air quotes
Yeah.
around the word retired from high school sports. Yes.
I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. My body's had enough. I stumbled upon editing in multimedia class at my high school.
In high school?
Yeah, yeah. It was
For
kind
real?
of a brand
Wow.
new thing. Being able to edit on a computer. Before that, you're having to like cut film and run thing. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I never
Yeah.
experienced that. But all of a sudden, it became pretty cool. It's like, oh, like we can film all these like random, videos of us screwing around at high school, and sports was something where I could put together highlight reels of like football and whatnot of some of my friends, and so it kind of grew this passion of like telling stories. And from there, I had already been accepted to go to Texas A&M University in College Station, and I was
All right.
going to be studying engineering. And I was like, well, there's this film thing that I'm really interested in. And I was like, it's really challenging to get into the engineering school at A&M. And I was like, I should probably stick with this. But maybe I can find some ways to scratch that film itch. And so I ended up working with the athletic department at Texas A&M and would travel with their teams.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it was a
man.
dream job
Yeah,
as a
heck yeah.
college student, to be able to like hop on the bus with the athletes, and we're going to games, and I'm filming football on the field and going to baseball and basketball and whatnot. And that was really fun. And that really whet my appetite to keep pressing on. And eventually I find my way to Austin, and there's two other filmmakers from A&M that were around my age that had relocated to Austin as well. And we decided to kind of go into all this stuff together. And it's one of those things, as the tide rises, so do all the ships. And we kind of all have grown and in our own ways, and still are all friends and get to work together occasionally and support each other. So it's been a really fun community and story just getting to hear. I've been doing this for almost, I guess, about 20 years now. I'm getting ready to go to my 20-year high school reunion.
Man, look at you. You're an old timer. Yeah. I can see some gray in your beard.
There's
man.
a
You've
lot.
got a few miles underneath you.
Just shaved it in this mustache to the eggs. I was like, well, why not? And so there was a lot more gray right in here.
I love your analogy. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say it this way. If you put a camera in your hands, you kind of get a backstage pass to life. It's fascinating how many people will just kind of throw open their life, not throw open doors necessarily, but throw open their life to somebody who tells a story with the film well. Let's be honest. Lots of people can tell stories with film and not do it well. You know that. But when you can tell a story well, it's amazing how many people will open up and share life with you.
Yeah.
And you and I both know, I don't know if I ever told you this, Jake, but I spent a few years in Austin. I absolutely loved Austin. I lived just a few blocks from downtown and from 6th Street, and the entertainment industry in Austin is really amazing. The people that live there know about it, but much of the rest of the world just doesn't understand how incredibly talented some of the people in Austin are. Not just technology, which is everywhere in Austin, but musicians, television shows. Austin City Limits has been highlighting that for years, some of the artistic community that lives in Austin, Texas.
Yeah. What years were you in Austin?
Oh man, you want me to go way back in time? I went to high school at Travis High School in Austin, Texas, and I lived just a couple of blocks from there.
So you like grew up here
and worked. Heck yeah. Well, just for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But I worked at a Whataburger restaurant on Altorf Avenue and lived just down the road from Travis High School.
Amazing. Oh, Whataburger was like my go-to. I'd get 2 number 2s with cheese after every football game growing up in Houston. So Whataburger was a staple.
Where I live, there are no Whataburger restaurants. So when I'm traveling and the family's with me, they all roll their eyes because they're like, oh, here he goes. Dad just found a Whataburger. We're going through the drive-thru, even if we don't need anything.
Yeah.
Because he's going to go back and relive being a teenager in Austin.
You have to. Yeah.
Hey, anybody who's listening is saying, well, Jake just had like the perfect childhood. But you and I both know that's far from the truth. So life threw you a curveball that you weren't expecting and that you now, many years later, are still affected by. Let's talk about what happened to your mother when you were a teenager.
Yeah. When I was 13, I lost my mom to cancer. And it was something, as a child, you can't even fathom life without a parent.
Right.
Like doesn't even compute that that's even a possibility. And so I knew my mom was sick. I knew she had cancer. It's something that she had battled with for about 3 years before it finally took her life. And so, growing up, I was the oldest of 3, and all of a sudden we became a single parent household. And I was 13, my sister would have been 10, my brother was around 6. And so it's wild to think about. And what's even crazier now is I am just a year away from being my mother's age she passed away.
When she passed? Wow.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm just getting started. And it's like crazy to think about when you put that in perspective. She was, just the most incredible mom, and I was just getting to know her beyond a mom, it's like, oh, you're a person, you have friends, you do things,
right.
You don't just take care of us. It's tough. Obviously it's tough losing a parent, and we miss her dearly. And it's one of those things, like I've obviously had plenty of time to think about this, over the years. I am who I am today by what has shaped me. Everything that's happened in my past has shaped me to who I am today and put me on the trajectory I am. And God has a plan. I've always known that. I don't always understand his plan, and that's okay. That's one of those things, I think it's called faith, where you just have to let things be and just hope for the best, and trust that it's all going to work out in the end. But, it's one of those things I always say, like, I would love for us to still have our mom. Like, that's one of those things, like, I would love for her to be here and to have all those experiences and memories, but I also, like, I wouldn't change anything about where I'm at today in my life. And it's one of those really hard lessons, that we all deal with. We all lose a parent at some point in time, but having to do that at such an early age really shaped me a lot. I don't think many 13-year-olds think about death too often, but it's something where, like, it comes up, probably on a daily basis for a long time, where you think about it, and it gives you appreciation for life and the decisions that you're making, how you want to live. And still to this day, my mom is making an impact, on me when I think about her and reflect on her life and the short time that she was here. But, I like to think that, she lived a full life, so full that God was like, you've accomplished everything that you needed to do, and, come home. And that's kind of how I've been able to make peace about it. But yeah.
Jake, there's a lot of people that have gone through loss, but not a lot of them can say what you just said, that although it's painful and every day you felt the effects of it for a long time, that you wouldn't change anything. And that is something that let's just be honest, man, you really are unbeatable for a number of reasons. But to look at the loss of a mother that way is quite rare, to be honest. Your mom was sick for a couple of years before she passed,
Yeah.
she had the diagnosis of cancer for 3 years, or she had been sick and then you guys found out that she had cancer during that 3-year period? When did this actually start for you?
Yeah, it was a diagnosis. And so it was around 1994. I remember coming home. I think I was in fourth grade. And I remember coming home, and I could see that she was upset, and she
Yeah.
told me what was happening. And I don't think the gravity of that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. She didn't look any different to me, but it was something, that they had discovered. And I forget exactly what was happening and why they went, to go to the doctor and see what was happening. And at one point in time, it seemed like everything had cleared up, but then it came back, even more aggressive the second time. And it's, I think, growing up in Houston, it's a great place to be to treat cancer, because of the cancer center there at MD Anderson. It's one of the best in the world. And I've always been told, at that time, and this is, from, family probably sharing this with me, that I think this was like the only, like, one of 3 cases that had ever been recorded of this type of cancer that she had. So it was super rare and very aggressive, and they weren't entirely sure how to treat it. And it might be different today, with the advances that we've had. But at that time, it was pretty bad. And so, and it was something with chemo and all the treatment and whatnot. And it takes, like, you do, she at one, at certain times she was still mom and looked exactly the same, and still lived her life. But then there was a time where you really started to see, like, her diminish, in a physical standpoint. But I mean, she still was our mom, and still, loved and enjoyed us, and, did all the things that a mom can do. It's another one of those things. Like, I know we've been talking about my mom a lot, for obvious reasons, but a lot of times you don't think about the other spouse, and the toll that it takes on, like my father.
Well, I was gonna ask you about your dad. How did he handle it?
It was a rough time for a little while, and I understand why, but for him to have the strength to, he basically took a year off from work, almost. Like, his work was super flexible and understanding and supportive of that, where he was my mom's primary caregiver. Which I think is rare. I don't even know if that would happen today.
Especially back in the mid or early 90s, man. That's very rare.
And so he took care of her. He took care of us. The amount of strength and endurance that he had to perform to make that happen. And then after she passed away, to still, work, raise 3 kids, get us out the door every day to school, somehow coach all of our sporting events. I still have no idea how he did that. He wasn't always head coach, but he was there and he was present. And I mean, it's one of those things. Like, I mean, had a super mom, but a super dad, who didn't give up and kept, pushing through. And so, I mean, and it's weird. The years after my mom passed away, I look back at very fondly, which is very strange. Like,
very weird. Yeah.
Like, I look back, and a lot of it's just the community that we lived in, where we were, the families who were our friends. Like, everybody rallied behind us. And I had an amazing group of friends who are still my best friends today. Like, we do a trip every year, where we go, to a random, like, last year we went to a Buffalo game in New York in the middle of December. It got snowed on, but, like, that was the trip that we planned to go do. And we're creating memories. We all have families now, and, we're still doing life together, even though we're kind of scattered throughout. But, getting to have a community like we had, and the people that took care of us, we had meals for, like, it felt like at least a year. Like, people were still helping us out with meals, and grandparents who were involved. My grandmother and my grandfather were like second parents to me. Grandmother was there every day when we got home from school. Grandfather taught me how to drive, taught me how to tie a tie. Like, he was present. And so it's like, family and community is just so much, and I'm really thankful that we had, everybody come together to help us. It's just unbelievable, and truly grateful for that. So it's one of those things I'll sing everybody's praises for forever, for rallying behind our family during that really challenging time.
We're going to talk about this part of it in a little bit, Jake, but losing a parent, there's no good age.
Yeah.
13 is about the worst age you can possibly choose, because that's when you're starting to figure life out. You need mom's opinion. You need dad around. But now you're a husband, you're a dad, and every day that you go through one of those big milestones, getting married, having children, mom's not around to experience it. So it's almost like losing her again and again and again when she's not around for those really big moments in your life where you would want mom around. And man, you really do have an incredible outlook on it.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to turn the corner now.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the entertainment industry. Just real briefly, would you describe for people some of the big projects that you worked on, and then hold off on describing the project that you and I worked on together, but kind of describe some of the big events, big projects that you've worked on that they can go out and find right now. Some of them award-winning projects.
Yeah. So the most recent thing would be Facing Nolan, which you talked about. It's a documentary about Nolan Ryan. Arguably,
I just want to break in. One of my favorite baseball players of all time. All of the baseball players in all history, Nolan Ryan is one of my favorite.
I mean, arguably one of the greatest pitchers of all time, depending on how you define, who he is and what he did and everything he accomplished. But yeah, I mean, growing up in Houston myself, and being somebody from Texas that played baseball, that was a dream job to get to work on.
Yep.
And so, Facing Nolan, kind of working backwards, there's a documentary called Jump Shot, and that is about the man who created what we know as the modern day jump shot in basketball. Super humble man that I got to spend some time with him near the end of his life. And it was an absolutely fascinating story to get to work on. That was a passion project that just ballooned into like a full blown feature documentary that ended up being executive produced by Steph Curry with the Warriors. If you're a basketball fan, you probably know that name. And another one that I'm really proud of that we got to work on.
Let's talk about Jump Shot for just a second. I am not a fan of the game of basketball. I don't know really anything about basketball. I started watching 2 minutes of Jump Shot and you had me hooked. And I was like, this guy, Kenny Sailors, is amazing. How come nobody in the world knows his name? You told his story well. Not only what he did for the game of basketball by bringing in some of the basketball greats to describe how he fundamentally changed the game, but man, what you did such a great job of in Jump Shot is talk about the man and the impact that he left on people, especially for more than 20 years of his life where nobody even knew who this guy was, nor what he did, for the game of basketball. Man, you tell a story really, really well. And you made me, a guy who doesn't really know the first thing or even care about the game of basketball, you had me hooked at 2 minutes in and I couldn't stop watching, which tells your skills behind the camera, man.
Yeah. I mean,
why Kenny Sailors? Why Jump Shot?
Yeah.
Like, what was it about this guy that got you hooked? Because you hooked me, man.
I will say it always starts with a great character. And so having a knack for like, is this person going to be able to entertain people for this long? Is this story really going to engage? And I wasn't sure about that at first. What originally attracted me to the story was the fact that somebody invented the jump shot. I was like, wait, hasn't that always been a part of the game? Like, how did they shoot a ball?
People always shot the basketball with both feet on the ground until this crazy guy by the name of Kenny Sailors decided to jump and shoot.
Yeah, it was a grounded game, and it was a two-handed set shot. And so I was like, you know what, at that point in time, I was a cinematographer. I was always behind the camera, but I was looking for an opportunity to get even more deeply rooted into a story as a director. And so I was looking for short film ideas and came across this story of a guy who created the jump shot in basketball. And so I was like, well, I could make a really short film that kind of touch and goes on the basics of this and, use that as a stepping stone to get to something else. But as I started to dive deeper into Kenny's life and his story, I was like, there is something bigger here that needs to be shared.
Yes,
I mean,
definitely.
can't go into all of it now because we could barely squeeze it in a 90-minute film. But
Right.
I think what ultimately kind of drove that story, and what I kind of always used as a vehicle to get through the documentary, was, he defined the game of basketball, but the game never defined who he was.
Right.
And so, like, everybody might know him as the basketball guy, but there were so many other things that he looked at that had value in his life beyond that. Basketball was just this tool that he had to connect with people. And so, yeah, that's definitely one that's, you don't have to be a basketball fan. You have to know anything about basketball. It's a character-driven documentary, and you'll have a lot of fun because it goes way beyond just basketball.
I am living proof of what Jake just said about his skills behind the camera. And as a director, you don't even need to know the game to get hooked into this documentary. Go through some of your other projects.
I guess one of the more visible ones recently that I've been doing is I've been doing some TV work with a couple that's based in Waco, Texas, that do a lot of fixing
almost
up.
Everybody on the planet knows who Joanna and Chip Gaines are.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I've been working with them a lot over the past couple of years, and she has a cooking show, and so I've shot 7 seasons of that cooking show for her, which has been really fun because she's a great cook. And we get to usually eat a lot of the food that she makes. And so that's been a dream job to get to work on.
Nice. She shares the food with the crew. Yeah. That's awesome. So, hey, people are dying to know this. Are they really as awesome on the other side of the camera as they appear?
They are. They are as genuine as they appear. And Chip is just as wild and crazy as he is, you see on camera. And she is super sweet. And kind and generous as you see on TV as well. So yeah, they're the real deal, and they're doing amazing things, and honored to be a part of the process. And then there's another documentary that I think is incredible that people should check out, and I don't know where exactly it is right now, but it's called Dealt, and it is about a card mechanic, so a card magician, somebody who will,
really,
yeah. And what's crazy about his story is, like, he can manipulate a deck of cards to do whatever he wants. So you never want to sit down and play a game of poker with him. And
do not play cards against this guy. Yes.
But the thing that is wild about his story is he is blind. He cannot see a thing.
No way.
I am 100%
You're blowing my mind right now.
Yeah, we've all questioned it.
And these are standard decks of cards with no kind of braille or anything on them.
He will play with somebody else's deck of cards.
Insane.
Like I've seen everybody test him every which way possible. And it's an amazing story because of what he can do, but also his mindset for, the life that he's been dealt as well, growing up and losing his sight at an early age, but still making the best of it and being the best in the world at what he does. And so it's a super inspiring story that I think people should check out too.
Okay, I can binge watch documentaries. Ask my wife and daughter. They'll tell you I can watch documentaries for endless hours. And I am sitting there running through every possible scenario in my mind of how can somebody who's totally blind tell the difference between an ace of spades and a 2 of clubs in a deck of cards. Like, there's no way in my mind that I can figure this out. Nothing makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know. All
right. I just added another documentary to my watch list. I got to see this thing. Is it already out? Is Delt out there?
Yeah,
can you check it out now?
It premiered back in 2015, I think, at South by Southwest Film Festival here in Austin. And so it used to be on Delta at one point in time. So Delta on Delta, I remember. But it might be
on Delta. I love it.
It might be on. I think it's streaming somewhere, maybe Hulu or something like that. But each one of these films are available on iTunes if you want to look them up on iTunes too. They're available for rent, but might be streaming someplace.
Yeah. And by the way, for people that are listening around the world, if you want to know more about these, we're going to tell you more about Jake, about some of his documentaries, some of them that are just blowing up right now, like Facing Nolan. But let's talk about the time that you and I got a chance to work together. So I'm going to go back in time a little bit for almost 10, this is more than 10 years ago now. And I should say, my wife is probably going to listen to this episode. And to this day, she is still not happy with what you and I did together. She's very happy with the finished product, but she's not happy with her husband. Let me put it that way. So I have a friend named Kenny Thomas, who was episode 1, by the way, everybody, of Unbeatable. That's how much I look up to Kenny. And Kenny called me and said, Jeff, what do you think about going back to Somalia together? Now, I had already been working with a producer by the name of Mary Beth Minnis, who had said, Jeff, let's take your story that's on paper and let's figure out a way to get it on film. We'll go to Hollywood, we'll rent a set, we'll build everything up to make it look like a studio. And as we were months into this, my friend Kenny says, Jeff, I want to go back to Mogadishu and I want you to go with me. That's the backstop for you get invited to take part in a documentary. But here's the catch. You have to go to literally the most dangerous city on earth if you're going to go do this. Tell me about the moment that you get the call to get involved with Return to Mogadishu with me and Kenny.
Yes. This is one of those stories that I still share frequently today. Because people always ask, like, what are some of the...
Because people ask you, are you insane? Yeah. What were you thinking? Why would you do this, Jake?
Yeah. They ask, where are some of the craziest places you've ever been? Like, tell me something. I'm like, well, first out of the gate, Mogadishu, and everybody's jaw just drops. I got a call. So yes, I got a call to be involved with this. And I think when we were talking, we weren't sure. We were not aware you were talking with Kenny, and that it was even a possibility that we would be going there. And so we were trying to think creatively, how can we tell this story, but not be there? Because I feel like boots on the ground, like that is going to have such a different dynamic element to the story and make it that much more powerful to see you and Kenny reliving these moments. And so I remember tossing out the idea one day. I was like, well, I mean, like, can we go? Like, is that even a possibility? It seems like that would be better for the story. Do I want to go? Not really, but I feel like for the story's sake, we should do it. And of course, I'm in my mid 20s. I don't have a family, and I'm like, whatever,
let's just go over there and get shot at. What the heck?
Yeah.
Why not?
And I think it was literally the next day. It was like, I got a call from Mary Beth, and she's like, I think we're going to Somalia. And I'm like, wait, what? Like that? We're actually doing this? This is happening? And then the next thing, we're talking about all the logistics behind it, but I remember the next thing I remember is I was being told that I needed to figure out what my blood type was. And I'm like, well, this is a first, to go on a film production. And like, they're like, you need to figure out.
Stuff just got real. If I have to tell you my blood type.
Yeah. So I had to go donate blood, because I was like, I don't know what my blood type is. And so, I remember all this like it was yesterday. And so all of a sudden, here we are. We're going to Somalia. We're not supposed to share this on any like social media platforms. That's for security issues. I remember telling my dad, and probably similar to how your wife responded, he was like, no, you're not going over there. And I'm like, no, like, look, he's like, I can't believe you're doing this. Like, he thought I was crazy, and maybe I was a little bit, but he was sweating it the entire time we were over there.
Oh man.
And so, that's what I remember.
Let me tell you how this timing worked out. And honestly, the way the timing worked out, I could not deny that obviously God wants us to go to Somalia. So I've been talking with you guys for weeks, maybe even months at this point, about filming the story, my story, and doing it on a set. You guys are working hard behind the scenes. There's already some plans in place. And then I get a phone call. I remember I'm driving and I pull over into a parking lot of a fast food restaurant, and I get a phone call from Kenny, and he's really, really serious. And when Kenny calls, I have a couple of buddies that when they call, I will drop anything and do whatever they ask. And Kenny was really, really hurting. He was really serious. And he said, Jeff, I need to go. And Jeff, I want you to go with me. And I said, Kenny, two things. Are you aware that Mogadishu is literally, I just left the military. I still have some access to the classified intelligence that we have out there. It is the most dangerous place on earth. And if you and I were to go there, we're going to get shot. You have a guitar. I carry a Bible. I don't know how that's going to work out for two people like us today. And secondly, if you and I go over there together, there's no guarantee that we're coming back. And are you aware, Kenny, that there's been some discussion? He said, I didn't even know. I had no idea. All I know is I need to go and I need you to go with me. That's literally how the phone call went. And in 15 minutes, I said, okay, I'm calling my wife and I'm calling Mary Beth and I'm telling them I need to go to Somalia. Why don't we just change locations instead of building a studio? Why don't we just go back to the exact same city streets? And man, I have the absolute, one of the reasons you're on this episode, Jake, is because of the mad respect I have for you for being willing to do this insane project with me and to go to Somalia. There was 15 minutes worth of thought put into this. And I just decided if Kenny needs to go, then I'm going.
Yeah. Yeah. And grateful that we're both here to be able to talk about it today. There were a lot of curveballs. I remember,
Yeah, I was going to say, can you describe just what it took to actually land on the airfield, the very airfield that we stayed in Mogadishu, and make it into the city streets? Because get through immigration and into Mogadishu, because that itself was a disaster. Well, not a disaster, but that itself was hard enough that would have caused most people to say, "This is insane. Don't do it."
Yeah, I don't know what all was shared with or communicated with whatever government was set up with Somalia at the time when we got there. But
I'll tell you right now, nothing.
Yeah.
They heard nothing from our end.
Yeah,
on purpose.
Probably, intentional and for the best. But I remember our director Matt was filming you like getting off of the plane. And that caused some red flags. And I was I'm a little bit more reserved. Like I'm very aware of my surroundings a lot of times.
By the way, everybody, very aware. So Jake had everything under control, or at least he was processing everything as we did this whole project.
Yeah. And I was kind of like, maybe we shouldn't be filming right now, but obviously like for story
maybe we shouldn't have cameras rolling while you're walking down the stairs getting off the airplane.
But so that happened. And I guess word quickly got to the Somali government or whoever was running it at the time, and they were not happy that we were there. And we were told if we were to leave the airport that we would be arrested. So distinctly remember that.
Yeah.
But we're in Somalia. So it's like we're in Mogadishu. Like we've got to get to where this story took place. And I don't know what strings were pulled to like make this happen. But stop me if I can't share any of these details, but we broke the rules.
No, go for it, man.
Somehow we acquired, 2 armored vehicles that we were able to get into and actually like navigate the streets of Mogadishu and relive some of these routes that you did what would have been 20 years prior.
20 years ago. Yeah, 20 years earlier.
Yeah. 30 years ago now. But 20 years ago at the time, which is crazy to think about. So here we are, driving in these armored vehicles, and you're in one vehicle, I'm with you, and Kenny's in the other vehicle, and you guys are on walkie, and we're having the conversations. And I just remember at one point in time, Kenny was like, "Hey," or you said, "Hey, Kenny, you realize we're in the Bakara market right now?" And he's like, "Yeah, acutely. I'm very aware." And I want to say it was maybe the week prior to us leaving, there was a bombing there. So
I'll give everybody this part of the details. 1 week before we showed up on the ground, we start to do all the plans and put pieces into place. The Somali government tries to get reestablished, but there is a stronghold of al-Shabaab terrorism over there. And 1 week before we showed up, al-Shabaab bombed the entire Somali Supreme Court and killed them all in a massive bombing attack right before we got there, which is basically the only attempt the government has had to try to establish some real, laws and real government in years. And as soon as they do it, immediately they're blown up. And this is still front page news. There's a security company that was working on the airfield that where commercial flights landed called SKA. And I got the greatest respect for these folks. So we let SKA know, hey, 2 former task force ranger guys from the movie Black Hawk Down are coming to Somalia, but don't tell anybody. And if you remember, Jake, we're sitting in this room with about a half a dozen Somalis who want to get in our bags, are looking at our passports, are saying, we're not letting you in the country. In fact, if you try to take a step forward, we're going to arrest you. You're going to wait in this room, and the next airplane that shows up, we're going to put you on that airplane and you're flying out of the country. And an SKA guy shows up behind the scenes and he starts basically maneuvering on our behalf. Let's just put it that way. And pretty soon we get a wink and a nod, and it's grab your bags and go around the corner real quick. You don't need to tell anybody what's happening. And there's 2 vehicles waiting for us to speed us away from the immigration office and get us into this super secret SKA compound where we start planning this trip into the city streets. That's what was happening behind the scenes. But we wouldn't have even made it into the city if it wasn't for SKA.
Yep. Yeah. And I remember it was one of the large, like, I guess the person who was in charge of SKA and our detail that we had was one of the largest men I've ever seen. Like just huge,
giant Fijian,
and his
who was
name,
a giant of like Dwayne Johnson, giant of a man,
and his name was Tiny, is what everyone called him.
Yep. Little background: we get into the SKA compound behind closed doors, and we start talking. And this is where you really shine, Jake. You and Matt both. I was like, look at these 2 guys. I've been in war zones. I've been in Iraq and Afghanistan many times by this point, and I kind of know what to expect. But you guys have never stepped foot into a place like this, and everything is basically against us. And Tiny starts to plan a little route for us to go travel back through the city streets. But Tiny says, I can just tell you in the last 2 or 3 days about the rocket attacks, about the mortar attacks, about the hand grenade attacks, about the armed men that have attacked this part of the city, this part of the city, this part of the city. So like you described, we're going to go out there on 2 armored SUVs, but we're going to have the Somali army in front of us and behind us. And we cannot go into the part of town that you did the big fight in Black Hawk Down in, because the Somali army won't go in there. Nobody, literally nobody will go in there. We don't go there. Somali army doesn't go there. Nobody goes in there. And Kenny, after we started planning this, Kenny Thomas pulled me out to the side and he's like, hey, Jeff, let's just take over this convoy while we're in the middle of the route and let's go in there. What are they going to say? What are they going to do? And sure enough, we get in the 2 armored vehicles and we start driving. And that's when I said, hey, Kenny, we're in this part. We're close to this part of town. And he's like, yeah, I know. So I grabbed the driver and I was like, hey, make a right turn right here. And the driver's like, huh? Wait a second, right turn. We're not supposed to make a right turn. We're supposed to go straight. And when we turned right, I don't know if you remember this, the Somali army in front of us and behind us looked at us and they said, you're crazy. And they peeled off and they just let us go by ourselves.
No, I didn't know this. I'm looking through a camera the whole time.
Yes.
So I'm just looking at you. I'm not looking at what's happening around. Yeah, that's wild.
Just for the people that watch this documentary, you and Matt captured this to perfection. When we turn the right corner, the entire attitude of the city changed because now you've got these 2 armored, very expensive SUVs in a part of town that nobody goes into. And you could feel the tension in the air, not just in the vehicles, but you could feel the tension everywhere because everybody was looking like, something bad is going to happen. when I asked Kenny, okay, you asked for it. We're in the Bacara Market part of town. This is what you want. Are you aware of that? And his answer was perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm acutely aware of it. I think everybody is acutely aware
Yeah.
of where we are right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about getting that shot, because at this point, man, you are, I don't want to, I'm not exaggerating when I use this language. You are putting your life on the line to get that shot with us. So tell me about that shot, will you?
Yeah. I mean, I guess you can only control so much. I guess could have controlled whether or not I wanted to get in the vehicle or not, but I kind of looked at it as like, well, this is probably as protected as we're going to be with anything over here. And I think you put a lot of trust in who you're with and in God, and you just take a step of faith to get in the vehicle. And it's one of those things. Still are smart as you can be. It's like, well, obviously we shouldn't get out of our vehicles, so let's stay in.
Yes.
But I think it is what makes that film, because we were not allowed out beyond this. This was our
Right.
one opportunity, our one chance.
Yeah, that's right. You get one shot at this, and you better make sure your cameras are rolling.
Yeah, to actually be in Mogadishu. And that's what this whole project, this whole story, retelling your story is about. And so I knew it's something that we needed to do for this to really count. And so it's like I said, it's one of those where it's still, it's a story that is still shared today, 10 years later, where, I'm saying this is one of the craziest things I got to do. But getting to see, I think there's something so authentic about documentary filmmaking that people are attracted to. And there are different types of documentaries nowadays. 10 years ago, documentary is a very different space. Like, there's only one streaming platform at that time 10 years ago, and it was brand new, and documentaries were not as accessible. And today there are a lot of documentaries that, there's a lot of recreations, and it's very like highly visualized storytelling. It's not really a documentary. It's a very cinematic way of storytelling. But like, there are those documentaries that are capturing these raw moments, and you're like the camera is right there as if you're an audience member. And in this case, as if the audience is riding along in this vehicle with you through Bacara Market. And I think you sense that because you're really there. I think, I don't know what all was going through your mind, but I'm sure you're like, why did I decide to do this? Why are we here? And there's maybe some hesitation, a little bit of fear, but also like there's so many things probably flooding back into your mind, into your memory, about your experience there. And so, I think for the sake of the story, to actually be there and get that authentic response, of you and Kenny, and what was happening and unfolding on screen is a huge part of why I think that film has been something that we're still talking about it today.
I want to compliment you, man. I didn't think that you could capture the emotion and the tension on film that you and Matt captured in that scene. Honestly, I look back over that scene and I'm like, this is cinema. This is cinematic genius, is really what it is. Kenny went in on the fight in helicopters. He went on foot late in the night to the crash site, and then he ran out of the city streets on foot, but he never really got a chance to see the ground that he was fighting on his entire life. I knew it because I drove through it, and I drove through it multiple times. So when we turned that corner and I asked Kenny, are you aware we're in the Bacara Market? It was me just asking him, are you aware this is the same ground that we fought on? But really what I wanted him to understand is we just did what everybody, even the professional army, said, don't do this because you're taking your life in your hands. Kenny, we just did the one thing that you said, I need to come back over to Somalia to do. Are you aware of it? And what you guys captured in this scene is the tension and the anxiety and even a bit of the fear in those vehicles. I didn't know you could capture that kind of emotion the way that you and Matt captured it. And man, I am so impressed with how that thing turned out.
Yeah, I am too. It's something that I'm incredibly proud of and honored to be a part of. I mean, for you to open up your personal journey to revisit such a significant moment in your life. That's one of those things. Like I don't have much, if anything, to really comprehend, what you and Kenny and everyone else went through there. But to have the bravery to go back, the courage to go back and to face those challenges head on, was something that I would say y'all's leadership, and I think gave me the courage to go, and Matt, to go do this, to be a part of it. And so, I mean, it's one of those things. I will forever tell this story. It was an incredible experience. Not one that I need to relive, I don't think. To go
course.
back.
Check that block. Don't need to do it a second time.
Yeah,
yep.
I'm pretty sure my wife now would say you are not going if it were
right.
to happen today. But yeah, it's one of those that I always look back on fondly, even though it was, like you mentioned earlier, the most dangerous place in the world. It's pretty wild. And going back, coming kind of full circle, having a camera in hand gives you that backstage pass to life. Like, I mean, why would I, 20 something year old, kid at the time, be in Somalia for any reason whatsoever? And here I am getting to tell this incredible story and how, so it's one of those things it's just wild. So yeah, honored and feel privileged to get to be a part of the story.
I don't think I've ever had a chance to thank you, but I owe you a favor. I owe you a thanks, because to this day, there's never been a moment, not even when the movie Black Hawk Down was premiering, there's never been a moment where I actually really relived some of the emotions until I was driving back out of the city streets with you. And I remember thinking to myself, this is exactly what I felt like in that vehicle with you, that I felt like in my vehicle with my Humvees the next morning. I was just overwhelmed with why, God, did you preserve my life? Why am I still alive? I don't understand why I survived and all of those guys around me didn't. And you gave me a chance to relive a moment. It's only happened once. It was in that vehicle with you. And it was right as we were entering back into the SKA compound at the airfield that I relived that moment. And man, I want to say thank you.
Yeah.
I've got mad respect for you behind the camera. But with the last few minutes that we have together, I've got mad respect for you as a father. You get asked to do something that's really hard to do. And I think every listener could learn from this part of your life. Sometimes when you're working a project, you're gone away from your family for days or weeks, and you've got young children and you've got a wife that loves you. And every time I'm speaking and I do a Q&A session, a question comes up every single time that I'm speaking. And people want to know, how do you have a strong family life and spend all of the time away that I do? You have learned how to do that, Jake. Would you talk to the audience a little bit? Because I don't know, I can't imagine anyone is listening to this and not wondering, how do you balance work and family? How do you do both and do them both well?
Yeah. It's tough, and can't say I've figured it out, but we're constantly engaging in conversations of how we can continue to improve what we have. I chose a career that is not the easiest one. There's lots of ups and downs. It's hard to plan anything ahead because I'll get a phone call and the next day or the next week, I have to cancel everything that we had scheduled and I'm out of town for
because I'm on an airplane going to Mogadishu.
Yeah, there you go. So I'm a contract freelance filmmaker, and so I have to take the calls when they come because that's how I earn my income. That's how I earn my living. And so, I always knew this was going to be a challenge as I was looking ahead at one day being married, one day being a father. And thankfully I have an amazing father to look up to and see how he was
definitely
involved with my life. I mentioned earlier, he somehow, had dinner and, breakfast ready and got us out the door and, coached us in all of our sporting events. And I was like, I want to be that
Wow.
dad. Like, I want to be present.
Yeah.
I want to be a part of my kids' lives. I don't want to miss out on those moments and those opportunities, but yet I do have to travel quite a bit. And so, yeah, sometimes ideally it's just a few days where I'm gone. Sometimes it is a little bit longer. And if it is anything more than, 10 days, that's a whole nother conversation of, is this like the right steps for me and my career? Is this going to open up a lot of opportunities? Is this a great financial opportunity? Is this the best thing for our family? And if so, how do we navigate those 10 days when my wife is at home by herself with two kids?
Right.
We have a 2.5-year-old and a 4-month-old right now. So we're like in the trenches.
Oh man. So that means you're running low on sleep when you're at home.
Yeah, for the
as
most
well.
part. Yeah. We sleep very well, but maybe not long enough sometimes. But yeah, it's a tough balance. And I mean, thankfully I have a wife who is incredibly patient. She's still the sweetest person I know. And that allows me to continue to have this type of career. And I think how we have found some healthy balance is we're always in conversation about how can we continue to move forward where you're doing what you still do, but maybe it's not as much travel, or maybe I'm just looking for specific types of jobs that, check these boxes off for us and not taking these other ones. And so I have to be a lot more, a little bit more picky about what I take on, but also, one of the goals that I have, and I know it probably is a huge relief for my wife, is that, I might be gone for like a week, but then I'm home for a week, and I make it a goal for myself to be fully present at home when I am home.
Yeah.
That's
that's key, right?
Spending time with kids, having quality time with her, like doing a date night, cooking dinner together, dropping kids off at daycare, picking them up early just to get them home. My wife, she is working, and so her hands are full too. It's a lot, and we're with having a new child at home now. We're kind of navigating what the new norm is. And so there's all kinds of challenges, but I think for us, like it all kind of falls back on, I think we're on the same page. We talk a lot about what we want as a married couple, as a family, and we're trying to move forward together. Which, thankfully for us, it's been really easy. Like, I think we have the same goals, and, we have a kind of a similar demeanor where we're able to kind of just roll with things. Even if they aren't perfect, we'll find a way to make it happen. And we're incredibly patient. And I think a lot of that kind of stems, from, our faith as well. Like, I think it's one of those things, like, we've always been provided for.
Yeah.
And like, God has always provided for us, with, food on the table, a roof over our head. Like, why would he stop doing that right now for us? And so as we're kind of navigating what this world looks like right now with as a family with 2 kids now, with how much I travel, it's really hard for other people to relate to. There aren't many people in our friend circle. Maybe everybody has a dual income family, but the husband's not traveling as often, or, the schedule changes as frequent. But so it's tough, but we're finding a way to make it happen.
You just gave some great advice, and I hope everybody that's listening just made a mental note of what you said. It's not easy. It's actually pretty simple, but it's not easy. You have faith. And I don't mean that you go out and chase the next endeavor, because if I don't do it, I might not be able to eat, because you've already said you're trusting God to put food on the table and a roof over your head. But what you really have that's beautiful, and I hope this is true for everybody. I don't have a perfect marriage. You don't have a perfect marriage, but you have an ongoing communication with your wife about what's best. Mm-hmm. And you're willing to say no to a project or two so that you can still have a family at the end of a career. And if you're willing to do that, you can navigate through the challenges of being away and still, being close to your family. It's not easy. It's relatively simple to figure out, but it's just not easy to do.
Yeah.
And Jake, like I said, I've got mad respect for you behind the camera, but I've got lots of respect for you as a husband and father. So thank you, man. Thank you for making episode 100 special and letting me relive a couple of those thrilling moments, even tasting for just a moment what it felt like to drive back out of those city streets in Mogadishu, just doing it with you a few years later. And thanks for being on this episode with me.
Thank you for having me. Great to catch up with you again.
Yeah. Man, Jake just gave some incredible advice to all of us. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter what kind of family that you have. Work is going to take a little bit away from your family, and family is going to end up taking a little bit away from work. And if you want to do two things well, when you're at work, be fully present at work. And when you're at home, be fully present at home. That's how you handle the challenges of work and family at the same time. Thanks, Jake, for being guest on episode 100 of Unbeatable. Now, cue the drum roll. I have been talking for several weeks about this giveaway, and we selected one member of the Unbeatable Army to give an entire library of my personal books to. I just want to say congratulations, Raymond. You just won the big giveaway. Here it is, all of my books signed and coming to you. Raymond, you got to look at your email because we're going to send you an email asking you what address you want us to ship these books to. If your ears just perked up when I said Unbeatable Army, it's because we've got a group of people connected with us. They don't just watch or listen to this podcast. They stay connected all week long. They stay connected on social media and by just simply searching for @Unbeatable Podcast, or they join the Unbeatable Army, this email list, and I send them content throughout the week just to keep them motivated, just to keep them encouraged so that they can be unbeatable when life is unmerciful. You want to be part of the Unbeatable Army? It's totally free. Just go over to unbeatablearmy.com and who knows, maybe you'll win some free stuff in the future. Thank you. We wouldn't be at episode 100 if it wasn't for amazing people tuned in and listening week after week. So thank you for making episode 100 possible. I hope you have a great week. I'll see you right back here next week for episode 101. See you next time.